Investigation.
I couldn't wait for that day. And then when I finally got there, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to think or how I was going to feel. But the most important thing to me was to see how that community might begin, but most importantly of all is a family. And it was a very strange emotional day. It was an
intense press conference too, because there were so many questions you couldn't answer and the prosecutor couldn't answer. And I could feel some frustration on the part of reporters in that room, because I know this investigation is still ongoing.
I don't blame him a bit for being frustrated. I don't blame him a bit. But we have to remember that now that we're where we are, it's not a community interest story. It's very factual now, and we have to be very careful. I think that's what everybody expects. So on one hand, we say to the media, thank you, and I really do mean that, for keeping this front and center, not just nationally, but even globally. But then the other side is when you have questions, we can't answer them. So I understand that frustration. I really, truly do.
And I know you can't answer every question that we have here, but we're going to fire away anyway. Is the guy in custody, Richard Allen, is he the only person being looked at in this investigation?
Right now, he's the one that's been that's now facing murder charges. So, again, we are not going to stop looking at other people until this is completely done and we have nothing left to do.
What could happen? Can you give us a hypothetical of what could happen if investigators say too much too soon? If somebody, and it doesn't have to be with this case in particular, just a hypothetical of a murder case, and somebody on the team or in the prosecutor's office says something that they shouldn't have. What's the domino effect that could happen potentially if you reveal too much information in a case like this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is there are things that we know that only the killer would know. And I'm speaking generally, and it's an investigative strategy, obviously, that if we know what the killer knows and nobody else does, that when we do talk to the killer, we'll have a clearer idea of what occurred. And that's a very similar strategy that we've used here.
One of the things that I've heard is why not release the cause of death? Not because people are morbidly curious, but if they knew they were looking for somebody that was either a stab or a gunshot, maybe they know somebody that sold the gun, sold the knife. Maybe they could find the weapon somewhere. What's the rationale for not releasing the official cause of death?
Because the individual or individuals that did it, only they know what they did.
But do you think that's, and I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, has that slowed down the investigation? Because I think the public, with all of their tips, has been a big help in this. Wouldn't it make sense to have the public looking for the possible weapon?
I don't think at this point it would. functionally, I understand the question, Hammer. I really do understand it. And we're going to look back on this and probably realize, dang it, I wish we'd have done A, B, and C rather than D and E.
Right.
But now's not the time for us to change that strategy and talk about everything that we know.
Another piece of information that came out since the arrest, and this was just the last couple of days, is that maybe this guy, Richard Allen, has been on the radar for a long time. Did he speak to investigators? Did he speak to police in the early stages of this investigation?
That'll all come out in due time. I'm not going to talk about Richard Allen today.
Yeah, that Wish. There was a story on Wish TV, our news gathering partners, about some police sources and some information. Did you see that yesterday?
I did.
The search of the Wabash River. They're saying a source is linked to the DELPHI investigation. Richard Allen, how long he's been on the radar. When you see a story like this, is it? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it frustrating, especially when you see a police source confirmed this? That's what they're saying.
That's a leak from within, right?
Is that? It is frustrating. I will say yes. It is absolutely frustrating because we can't talk about what we think, and I've said this many times before. You should expect us to only talk about what we know. This case is unlike any that I've seen in almost a 40-year career. So there are so many different tentacles to this. It's very complex, and shame on us for saying something that might jeopardize that. So whoever this quote source is, I doubt very seriously that individual is a part of the core team.
The other name that's involved in this whole story is Keegan Kline. Now, he has not been charged with anything in regards to the murders of these beautiful young ladies in Delphi, but we know that he's locked up for child porn. We know that he had some sort of communication with one of the ladies the day before they passed away. Has he been speaking to police? Has he been given some sort of plea deal to help police?
We'll continue to work on Keegan Kline and whatever his connectivity might be to Abby and Libby and almost 2,100 days ago. So we will continue to work towards that.
Police Superintendent Doug Carter is here. One more thing on the Delphi story before we move on to something else. I have been pretty critical of some of these press conferences. You touched on it earlier. You understand why the press would be a little upset. My beef with a lot of these early on was that it felt like these things were happening just for the sake of happening. There was no new information. And the reason I felt that way, I was trying to think, if I was the parent of one of these young ladies, I feel like I would be getting my hopes up every time one of these press conferences would happen, but then they would happen and there's no new information. And then it would feel like sometimes there'd be some theatrics, like some cliches being thrown out there, which, again, felt like it was getting the hopes up of these families. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I can see your perspective, but that wasn't the case. There was one press conference I can remember specifically that Mike and Becky were not aware of. And I regret that. I take responsibility here. And if there's going to be criticism, I want it to come to me. But over time, it was important that we kept talking about this.
Right.
And Hammer, had we not done that, we wouldn't have been able to say to the media, thank you for keeping it front and center. So
asking for tips, and hotline,
information. Yeah. Everybody expects everything to be solved through science today, and that's just always not the case. It's a combination of all of it. So the human impact has been really, really fascinating to watch. And again, we didn't have a playbook here, and we did the very best we could for over 5.5 years. And again, we look back on some of the events and strategies. I'll look forward to debating those as time goes on.
What do you think the biggest mistake has been? Can you talk about that? Like, I know there's an ongoing investigation, but a couple times today you've said, we're going to learn from this. We've made mistakes. Yeah. Give me an example.
Was the sketch, the two sketches?
No, I don't think that was a mistake at all. That was frankly a pretty effective strategy that kept information coming our way.
Because the second one looked nothing like this guy that's into custody. The first one, you could put a side-by-side up with Richard Allen, and you can say, I see that. The second one looked nothing like that guy.
Yeah, and that's something.
But was that the right thing to put that out? Because clearly it doesn't look like him.
Well, again, remember, the photo or a sketch is not a photograph. It's a sketch based on human recollection. So I was convinced that eventually we were going to put those together and we were going to be able to take them apart, and there's going to be the individual. So, we're human beings. We're expected to be superhuman. We're not. And we do the best we can every single day, and that's what we'll continue to do.
When someone says, I think Superintendent Carter just loves to see himself on television, what's your response?
Oh, that's crazy. No, I'm aging like an old farm dog. That's not the case at all. What I'm trying to do is keep community and areas around the state aware of what we're doing as much as we possibly can, because this isn't
I grew up in a place where they told you what to chase, told you how to run the race. Every move was on the page, but I didn't like their way. Had to fight and misbehave.